one breath I'm living on. In this one breath I'm praising back. It's the Ruach Hakodesh. I'm living on the Ruach Hakodesh. We're living on the Ruach Hakodesh of Yahweh. 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 We're living on the living, breathing Spirit of God that's moving all of the days of our lives. The living, moving breath of God that's moving, living all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God, we're living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God, we're living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God, we're living, moving all of our days. And we're living, moving on the breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God that's living, moving all of our days. On the living, moving breath of God, on the living, moving all of our days. our days on the living, moving breath of God. Living, moving all of our days in the living, moving breath of God. In the living, moving all of our days on the living, moving breath of you. Living, moving all of it's so sweet. Living, moving breath of God. Living, moving all of our days. You are the Ruach Hakodesh. 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 God formed man in the garden, dirt, sweat, and love. And he lay there with no breath. And then he came and he gave as the Father laid man in the garden, formed him out of dust and love. And then he said, one thing is missing. Here is my life, here is my breath. God formed man in the garden out of dust and love. And he came and said, one thing is missing. Here is my life, here is my breath. The Ruach Hakodesh. The Ruach Hakodesh is yours. The Ruach Hakodesh. The Ruach Hakodesh. I hear him say, I formed you here in the garden out of dust and love. And there was only one thing missing, and I will give you from my love. The Ruach Hakodesh. The Ruach Hakodesh, come alive. Ruach Hakodesh, come alive. Ruach Hakodesh, hey, I formed you here in my garden out of dust and love. And only one thing's missing, the breath of my love. The Ruach Hakodesh, don't forget the Ruach Hakodesh. Don't forget the Ruach Hakodesh. God breathes, man lives. 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 Even now, God breathes, man lives. Even now, God breathes, man lives. God breathes, man lives. There is one man, man lives. There is one wind, man lives. God breathes, man lives. God breathes, man lives. Here is the Ruach Hakodesh. It's even now the same. You breathe, we live. You breathe, we live. You breathe, we live. Even Jesus said, it says that he breathed and said, receive the Holy Spirit. God breathes and man lives. We honor it today. God breathes. Hey, God breathes, man lives. 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 God breathes, man. I hear the bones rock. God breathes, man lives. God breathes. breathe you in. We breathe you in. Oh, Ruach Hakodesh, we receive you. We breathe you in. We breathe. Be filled with the Holy Spirit. Breathe in the breath of God. Oh, we breathe you in. We breathe you in. Oh, we breathe you in. 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 Oh, 'cause living is easy. You win. We breathe you in. We breathe you in. Oh, right now we breathe you in. We breathe you in. We breathe you in. Oh, I really believe the Lord is teaching us how to breathe in right now. I think that sometimes we get so caught up in all the things we should do to connect with God that we forget that the easiest, best thing to do is to breathe in and to receive the Holy Spirit, to receive the continuous life and love of God. This pleases God, that we would receive the breath that He's breathing out, and then naturally we'll breathe it out too. So we receive the holy breath of God. We're aware of the holy breath of God, that we never left your presence, that we never left, and we just receive the Spirit that makes all things alive. This is how we abide in and out, in and out. We just abide today. In and out. That's God. That's you, Lord. In and out. That's the breath of God. No matter how shallow, that's the breath you gave. That's the thing you give over and over every morning, every morning. It's the Ruach Hakodesh, the same breath that raised Jesus, the same breath that raised Adam, the same breath that found the upper room, the same breath that created the worlds. Ooh, in and out and in and out. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. In and out. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The beginning. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The very breath. The same breath that made something out of... It's lasted this long. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. Creator God that made something out of nothing. The same breath that made something out of nothing. Creator God that made something out of nothing. Creator sustainer that made something out of nothing. Creator breath that made something out of nothing. My sustainer that made something out of nothing. My sustainer that made something